Well, good afternoon and welcome to Live Impact News here on 13 News Now. 1 o'clock p.m. on May 8th. It is, in fact, a Friday afternoon, and we are joined in our afternoon stream, a bit unusual here. Sarah Calloway, the super producer, still with us for the afternoon. Sarah, we've got 2 more hours of Live Impact News, and we begin the show with a breaking news story that came across our desks around 10:15 a.m. We spent the majority of our morning stream covering it, and we've got plenty more coverage, more updates, more statements to come on the news that the Virginia Supreme Court has struck down the Democratic congressional redistricting plan that had 1 voter approval. The court's decision on Friday has marked a major setback for Democrats in the nationwide redistricting battle with Republicans that has come ahead of the midterm elections. Remember, Virginia, the latest in a series of states to get involved in that redistricting battle. It looked like a win for Democrats. That has been nullified by the Virginia Supreme Court. The court said state lawmakers violated procedural requirements when referring the plan to the ballot. So, what are we discussing here? What is at the crux of those procedural requirements? Well, the amendment must be approved by the legislature before the general election in order to get this special election vote onto the ballot later on April 21st, right? So this process was happening in the lead up to the general election in 2025. They needed to get an amendment passed through the legislature before that election in 2025 in order to then set up the special election in which that redistricting referendum was the only thing on the ballot, a special election in which the approval of that new map favoring Democrats won here in the Commonwealth. So, did they or did they not get that amendment approved before the general election in 2025? Now, when I say it like that, it seems like it should be relatively cut and dry. Did they or did they not? Yes or no? Did they hit the timeline or didn't they? However, there are questions going into this court case around when that timeline exactly begins. They needed to get it in before the election. They got it in before Election Day, but they did not get that amendment passed before early voting had begun for that election. So the question became, does that early voting constitute the start of the election? In which case, the Virginia legislature would not have met the requirements in order to get that amendment through in time for the special election in April to occur. The Virginia Supreme Court has ruled that essentially they did not. Basically, that is what this ruling has come down to, is that they did not get that amendment in. They did not meet the procedural requirements because early voting has essentially been determined to be the start of the election. They did not get it in before the election. So that is where we stand now. Let's go over some of the reaction that we have seen following this major breaking news today. We begin with Governor Abigail Spanberger. Quote, more than 3 million Virginians cast their ballots in Virginia's redistricting referendum, and the majority of Virginia voters voted to push back against a president who said he is entitled to more Republican seats in Congress with a temporary and responsive referendum. They made their voices heard. I am disappointed by the Supreme Court of Virginia's ruling, but my focus as governor will be on ensuring that all voters have the information necessary to make their voices heard this November in the midterm elections, because in those elections, we, the voters, will have the final say. So Governor Spanberger, disappointed in the ruling, looking ahead to the midterms nonetheless. Allow us to take a moment, having read that statement, to insert a reminder here, is that currently the Virginia representation in the House of Representatives in Congress sits at a 6-4 advantage for Democrats. The redrawing of this map, the redrawing that was nullified by this decision, would have likely changed that advantage to an 11-1 advantage. A 10-1 advantage would have likely been the new advantage for Democrats in that redistricting map. So, this does not mean that that 6-4 advantage will remain the same. It simply means that the new redistricting will not be in place. The advantage for Democrats or Republicans could still change in this midterm election. It is still up for debate. Who will win what districts? The actual votes must be submitted and tallied. So it remains to be seen what the breakdown in numbers will be here in Virginia come the midterms. Now, let's move on to Governor Glenn Youngkin, Abigail Spanberger's predecessor, and what he had to say about this decision. Justice has been served. From the beginning, this was the most obvious violation of Virginia's Constitution. Abigail Spanberger and Democrats in Richmond knowingly violated our Constitution to disenfranchise millions of Americans. The Constitution prevailed, and Virginians will never forget this unlawful attempt to rob them of their voice in Congress. So, Governor Glenn Youngkin mentioning Abigail Spanberger by name in the case of his statement, and then going on to give his view on the ruling. So you can already see the bipartisan nature that was abundantly clear before we even got this ruling when it comes to this particular issue. Let's carry on with statements from elected officials. How about Lieutenant Governor Ghazala Hashmi on the Supreme Court of Virginia decision? We won't read the entirety of this statement because it is lengthy, but we will read some of it in the least. Now, this April, millions of Virginians from every corner of the Commonwealth participated in our democratic process and cast their ballots in good faith. At a moment when voting rights are under sustained attack across the country, the Supreme Court's decision sends a deeply troubling message. Across the nation, we are witnessing a systematic dismantling of electoral integrity, all for the sake of partisan advantage. The recent and disturbing actions of the Supreme Court of the United States as it gutted the Voting Rights Act, the unconstitutional actions of Donald Trump and Republican-controlled states to redraw congressional maps without any engagement with state voters, and the abuse of a Republican majority of Congress that continues to strip rights from millions of Americans all define a frightening path towards the dismantling of democracy. The scale and coordination of these efforts are unprecedented in modern American history. Now, in a 4-3 decision, the Supreme Court of Virginia has told voters in the Commonwealth, that their voices can simply be discarded. This decision does not exist in isolation. It comes amid years of assault on fundamental civil rights, the battles for voting rights, evaluating hyperpartisanship, and coordinated efforts to erode public trust in democratic institutions. These actions disenfranchise voters and weaken the very principles of our country. Lieutenant Governor Ghazala Hashmi. Let's touch on another piece of context from within that statement that certainly plays a major role in our coverage here, and that is the recent United States Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, and their decision on a Louisiana redistricting case that has severely weakened the Voting Rights Act of 1965, specifically Section 2 of that piece of legislation. That decision from the Supreme Court has now sent many southern states into a scramble to redistrict their own voting maps ahead of the midterms. Due to that decision from the Supreme Court, the precedents and the rules by which many states can redistrict have changed. And especially in the South, those states are now jumping in and redrawing their maps in what will reportedly be major advantages for Republican representatives. Now, we saw this actually happen in Tennessee yesterday. And as those maps were being redrawn by Tennessee legislatures, there were protests at the State House in which that was happening. We've also seen many of the statements today point to the fact that there was an actual vote here in Virginia. Part of the reason that that vote went forward is because this case, the one that we're discussing about the legality of this redistricting referendum, the one that the Virginia Supreme Court has now decided was unconstitutional, that case came to the Supreme Court before that April 21st election. The Virginia Supreme Court decided they would wait until after the election to make a ruling. They waited until after 3 million Virginians had voted, until after $83 million were spent, countless hours of time from elected officials, lawmakers, and others, and then they decided to rule to nullify the results of that vote, deeming them unconstitutional because of that procedural requirement regarding when an election begins. Now, we have heard from Spanberger, we have heard from Ghazala Hashmi. Let's carry out the rest of the Democratic ticket that took the governor's mansion earlier this year and hear from Attorney General Jay Jones regarding this decision. Jay Jones, as quoted. Today, the Supreme Court of Virginia has chosen to put politics over the rule of law by issuing a ruling that overturns the April 21st special election on redistricting. This decision silences the voices of the millions of Virginians who cast their ballots in every corner of the Commonwealth, and it fuels the growing fears across our nation about the state of our democracy. As Attorney General, it is my job to enforce the laws on the books and defend the will of the people. Before the court, my office clearly laid out both in filings and oral arguments that this constitutional amendment process and voter ratification occurred in a timely, constitutionally compliant, and legally sound manner. The Republican-led majority of the Supreme Court of Virginia contorted the plain language of the Constitution and Code of Virginia to give it a meaning that was never intended, which allowed them to reach the wrong legal conclusion that fit their political agenda. The consequences of their error are grave. The strength and stability of our democracy depends on adherence to the rule of law, the execution of free and fair elections where every eligible voter can cast their ballots to choose their leaders, and public trust in the institutions that provide accountability and protect our democratic processes. This court's ruling follows a dangerous trend of tilting power away from the people. My team is carefully reviewing this unprecedented order, and we are evaluating every legal pathway forward to defend the will of the people and protect the integrity of Virginia's elections. Now, if we get word on actual steps being taken down any of those supposed legal pathways, we'll certainly bring you those updates as soon as possible. In the meantime, Jay Jones, more specifically referencing some of the legal arguments regarding this case and the unconstitutionality that was applied to when that amendment was submitted by the Democratic-led Virginia legislature. So what we're going to do now is we are going to take a break. When we get back from that commercial, we're going to stick on this topic. We are going to hear from the former Republican Attorney General. That is coming up next. And we return to Live Impact News with continued coverage of today's breaking news that the Virginia Supreme Court has ruled against that decision that was made by Virginia voters regarding redistricting. They have ruled that the procedure of getting that referendum on the special election ballot was illegitimate. So that means that we are in a situation now where the results of that campaign and the map that came from it have been basically ruled ineligible by the Virginia Supreme Court. It is back to the original map before there was the redrawing of districts. And for more coverage of this, we now go to an interview from from about a couple hours ago, maybe 11:30-ish. We got this interview from former Virginia Attorney General Ken Cuccinelli giving his thoughts on this Virginia Supreme Court ruling. Let's take a listen.
So first, a summary of what has happened. The Virginia General Assembly, as you all know, in 2025 passed for the first time a proposed constitutional amendment, a state constitutional amendment. All constitutional issues here are related to Virginia's state constitution. And they did that in 2025 on Halloween. On Halloween, the Democrat-controlled Virginia General Assembly passed its gerrymandering amendment for the first time. Virginia's state constitution has a requirement in Article 12, Section 1, that there be an intervening election between the first passage of a proposed amendment and the second passage of a proposed amendment. And in Virginia, we have our state elections in odd years. You will all recall that now Governor Spanberger was elected last November, as was the entire House of Delegates of Virginia. That was a Virginia state election. And the Democrat General Assembly wanted the court to consider that election the intervening election required under Article 12, Section 1. The problem is, the last time the Democrats had full control in Virginia, they gave us a 45-day election that began on September 19th of 2025. So by the time the General Assembly passed the gerrymandering amendment for the first time, Virginia's election had been going on for 6 weeks, and over 1.3 million Virginians had already voted. Now, we have had over 60 constitutional amendments proposed since the 1971 rewrite of Virginia's Constitution. Never before, in over 60 different instances, has the Virginia General Assembly passed a proposed amendment while Virginians were voting. Never before. This was unprecedented. And the Democrats' position, carried by the Attorney General Jay Jones, was that the election, for purposes of that intervening election requirement, was just Election Day. And so the fact that Halloween was before Election Day, they argued was adequate to fulfill the requirement, the strict requirement of Virginia's Constitution. The majority today rejected that argument by a vote of 4-3. That 4-3 vote broke down on partisan lines. I'm sorry to say that the 4 justices who voted to reject the referendum as unconstitutional were all appointed by Republican General Assemblies, and the 3 in dissent were all appointed by Democrat General Assemblies. I'll come back to that point later, but this was a 4-3 decision rejecting the referendum. That means that Virginia's current 6-5 map remains in place and is the official map of Virginia for now and the foreseeable future, in the absence of some other attempt by the General Assembly to properly amend the Constitution. And to be specific about that constitutional amendment, the gerrymander amendment was intended to replace Virginia's 5-year-old bipartisan redistricting commission, which had passed by a 2-1 margin in just 2020. That was what they were attempting to undo. There is a second case that enjoined the certification of the referendum. That case is now moot and will never be decided by the Virginia Supreme Court because the referendum has been thrown out. There's no need to address the other constitutional and statutory violations by the Democrat General Assembly. Additionally, there is a third case addressing the gerrymandering maps themselves, and that, of course, is also now moot because the referendum was thrown out, so the General Assembly could not draw new maps. And so Virginia's congressional maps for 2026 remain the same as they were in 2024 and 2022. Going through the opinion, that's the summary version. I'm looking at my notes here. I would note for the lawyers listening that there was absolutely no mention in the opinion of the statute that was alleged to have been violated, Virginia Code Section 30-13, which requires circuit court clerks to put a notice on the courthouse door 90 days before any election of then operative proposed state constitutional amendments, like the gerrymandering amendment. So under that statute, the clerks would have been required to post the language of the amendment on the courthouse door in June. Well, the fact that the Supreme Court ignored that and decided a constitutional issue based on the theory of constitutional avoidance, by which courts try not to reach constitutional issues if there's another way to decide the case, indicates that that statute will never be useful to a challenger in getting a referendum thrown out if it is violated and clerks of court don't post notice. So that is the statutory challenge that was part of this case. The other constitutional challenge that was part of this case was related to the General Assembly's use of the special session, and there were two problems with it. First, it was called in 2024, May of 2024, to deal with budget issues. So first is the agenda. It dealt with the budget and those things in the budget resolution, and the resolution said that the agenda could only be changed by unanimous consent. Well, they changed it by majority vote to add the constitutional amendment. So the agenda change in violation of their own resolution was issue one. Issue two, these are state constitutional issues, was the fact that that special session allegedly carried over through and passed and out of the 2025 general session of the General Assembly. And the argument of the challengers was, the Republicans in this case, was that the general session of the General Assembly ends any special session because general sessions are unlimited, anything can be proposed. But the court, in footnote 6 in particular, said we are not going to reach that question because we have decided the referendum was unconstitutional under Article 12, Section 1, and so there's no need to reach the questions related to the General Assembly's special session. So to recap, there were three legal challenges: a statutory challenge that the clerks didn't post notice of the amendment prior to Virginia's 2025 election. That challenge was ignored by the court, literally wasn't even commented on by the majority, indicating that the court will not throw out a referendum based on that statute. The intervening election requirement of Virginia's Constitution was violated. That was the determination of the court that affirmed the finding below of the lower court and thus threw out the referendum. And then the third challenge, the constitutional challenge on the special session issues, was raised but explicitly not addressed because the case was resolved on the other constitutional basis. I would note that the majority opinion went to some length in laying out legal authority that would question whether that special session would have been viable, even in the absence of the court's ruling on the Article 12, Section 1 provision. Okay, that is the summary. Melody, if you want to lob me questions, any questions that have come in, I'd rather take them in writing than live. I would also note that I've tweeted a summary. It's pinned to my Twitter page at this point along those lines.
Okay, welcome back to Live Impact News as Ken Cuccinelli with his press conference earlier today. Now, what you just saw very briefly on your screen is actually an interview that we have set up for 1:30 today. That interview still has about 6 minutes before everyone's logged on and we get started. It's going to be on misinformation and disinformation. We are really looking forward to that interview, but in the meantime, we have a couple more minutes of redistricting coverage that we want to get to here. Okay, let's go with some more statements from lawmakers. Now, this in particular is the two most likely opponents in the upcoming election for District 2 representation in the midterms. This is Elaine Luria, a former congressman from District 2, and Jen Kiggans, the current congressman from District 2. They have faced off in elections before and will, barring any unforeseen developments in primaries, be facing off again in November in these midterms. And the District 2, the district that they are vying to represent and that Jen Kiggans currently represents, was a part of this redistricting. That second district was in some ways tinkered with. It will now revert back. And according to Leslie Coggle from Virginia Wesleyan University, who we talked to earlier and who we'll hear from later, the reversion back to the original map likely makes this a more competitive race. Let's go through the statements. Let's start with Elaine Luria and begin with her reaction to this Virginia Supreme Court ruling. From Elaine Luria, and actually give me a second, I can pull this up. I was not prepared there for a second, Sarah. I thought we had a board for that one. No board? Okay, no problem. This will only take just a second for me to pull this up. We have, again, Elaine Luria and Jen Kiggans vying for representation in that second district seat in the House of Representatives. Their campaign is a part of what this redistricting battle has been all about, is that finding more Republican and Democratic seats across the country is what we have seen this redistricting battle really come down to. And I appreciate everyone's patience for bearing with me as I locate this statement very quickly in our notes. We've had quite a few statements, as you've already seen here, come in from elected officials. Okay, I am going to go through this now as we speak. Again, this is from Elaine Luria, two-term member of Congress, 20-year United States Navy veteran. Quote, "As I have said since day one of this campaign, I intend to win Virginia's 2nd congressional district to end the failed policies of Jen Kiggans, President Trump, and a broken Washington that have made life unaffordable for Virginians and their families. The Virginia Supreme Court's decision today does not change that. Unlike Republican-controlled states, Virginia put the proposed maps to a vote with nearly 1.6 million Virginians overwhelmingly supporting the referendum to level the playing field, preserve fair representation, and protect our democracy. We will continue our campaign's momentum into November to flip this seat, fight for working families, and get to work for the Virginians who are being left behind by Jen Kiggans and Donald Trump." So mentioning Jen Kiggans by name there in that statement is Elaine Luria multiple times, as well as President Donald Trump. Let's now move to Representative Kiggans' statement herself, and this again will take just a moment for me to locate within our notes, as again you can imagine the amount of statements. Just about everyone has had a reaction to this ruling from the Virginia Supreme Court. Let's go with the statement from Jen Kiggans. "The Supreme Court of Virginia's ruling is a victory for Virginians' right to fair and adequate representation against the Democrats' attempt to unfairly grab power through an unconstitutional gerrymander of Virginia. Violating the Virginia Constitution and bypassing the rule of law to further one's own political power is wrong. Had Abigail Spanberger and the rest of Virginia's Democrats succeeded, they would have caused irreparable harm to our democracy and disenfranchised millions of Virginians. I thank the Supreme Court for its for its courage in standing up for what's right." So, reactions there on both sides from Elaine Luria and Jen Kiggans. And now we will go to break once more. When we return from this break, we have a brief reprieve from our redistricting coverage. We are going to have an interview here, a very special guest, to talk about misinformation, a problem that has become more and more prevalent here in our society over the last decade to decade and a half. And we are then going to get back into our redistricting coverage with plenty more information to bring you on this massive Virginia Supreme Court ruling. For the time being, a quick commercial. We will be right back. All right, welcome back to Live Impact News here on 13 News Now. 1:30 p.m. here on May 8th. It is, in fact, a Friday afternoon, and we are lucky to welcome a special guest into our stream now. The CEO of IPR, the Institute of Public Relations, Dr. Tina McCorkindale joins us. And Dr. McCorkindale, our viewers know it well, is that I'm kind of constantly meeting people for the first time during a live TV interview. So my name is Connor. It's wonderful to meet you. Thanks for taking a little time with us today.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. And
Thanks
this
for
is a
having me.
topic.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely, no problem. We really appreciate you being here because this is a topic that we've wanted to dive into. Misinformation and disinformation, and really the crux of sort of this story here and why we are so intrigued to have you on in particular is a specific study from 2026 that has disinformation and misinformation independently ranking as more pressing concerns for Americans than illegal drug use, gun violence, and crime, which is a shocking sentence to read, albeit one that is very telling about our place right now as a country. Now, I first want to start here. This is something that I actually had a friend ask me anecdotally not too long ago. The difference between disinformation and misinformation. Can you lay that out for us before we dig into it?
Sure. So both are not great, but disinformation is deliberately false or misleading information where the sender is intentionally trying to deceive or further some agenda, knowing that it's false information.
Okay, so intent there seems to be really the dividing line between disinformation and misinformation. So, okay, let's start here. This obviously is something that has become more and more of a publicly stated major concern for Americans. I'm wondering, is disinformation and misinformation, actually, let's stick with disinformation. Is disinformation at an all-time high, or is it the awareness that's at an all-time high, or could it be both?
Yeah, so I can tell you what it is since we've been doing this study in 2019. It is at an all-time high since we've done this study every year. It's at 71% of the 2,000 Americans that we surveyed said it is a major issue in society. The number one and two issues are healthcare costs and the economy. So there's only a 1 percentage point difference between the economy and disinformation. Economy is at 72%. So definitely a significant issue according to Americans on both sides of the political aisle.
And then, we go over to misinformation. And when people think disinformation and there's that intent to create confusion or to create, mistaken facts with disinformation, and you can clearly see how bad actors would want to use that to their advantage. But when it comes to misinformation, I'm wondering, how has this become such a problem when it's something that does not have that sort of declared intent behind it and then the beneficial consequences for those who perpetrate it? How has misinformation become such a major modern issue?
Yeah, misinformation has become an issue because of disinformation. So I'll explain this. Disinformation starts out as disinformation, but people, it's up to us who we're the ones who are sharing it. So disinformation can become misinformation because people will share it not knowing that it is false and misleading. In fact, research by MIT a few years ago found that false information spreads 6 times faster than truthful information. And the reason for that is it's usually, it's more emotional, it's more engaging, it's designed to incite and get people angry, so they're more likely to share it.
And now when we talk about the rise of those two factors, I think we're going to dive into some different platforms of media and how they contribute to this. But I just want to more generally ask, where does gatekeeping from a media perspective stand in 2026?
I mean, I could probably talk about that for a long time, but there are a lot of gatekeepers. We have a lot of traditional media sources that do a great job of vetting what they put out. However, we do have a lot of non-vetted media sources that aren't necessarily checking. And I put media in quotations because anyone can be a media outlet, but really trusted journalism, especially local news, is especially important for people to turn to for reliable information. And plus, with the addition of the influencer community, some are really great, some are not. And there's a lot of with AI and other sort of programs that are designed to trick people sometimes. AI is great, but it can also be used as a force for not so good things.
And then, we started out, you talk about social media and just the internet in general. And I think there was this idealistic view of both the internet and social media when each of those things were respectively getting started, that this will be the thing to bring us all together. This will be the thing to connect the globe in a way that was previously unthinkable. And yet now we're in a situation where misinformation and disinformation are the biggest concern, among the biggest concerns in American life. Is there a linchpin moment where you feel like we turned from, oh, this is going to be great, to, oh, this is creating a new major problem here? Can you point to any specific year, instance, or invention that led to that sort of changeover?
Yeah, so we are a nonpartisan organization, but it is typically around some sort of divisive like election. So probably when we saw it really hit was during the 2016 presidential election, where we saw an increase in disinformation that was spread. And we also saw interference from like Russia and China into the election. So that also creates major challenges. And we've also seen a shift from some of the social media platforms who are doing less to stop disinformation, including, what we do find that helps when you put a banner on information that says this could be disinformation, but it's just not consistent from the social media platforms as well, which is why, to your point, social media, the purpose of bringing people together, that is really what we should use it for, and not to be divisive in our communities.
And then, when we look at some of your other 2026 findings here, we don't want to do too much of patting ourselves on the back, I suppose, but you do have here that local news remains one of the few sources trusted by both Democrats and Republicans to provide reliable information. What has made local news something that has, to a degree, maintained that independence and that immunity to this issue that has become so prevalent?
Yeah, so year after year, we find local media is both print and journalism, print/online and broadcast, that we do find that they are the most credible media sources between both Democrats and Republicans. We don't see that alignment with other media sources, both newspaper or our major media stations. So local news is where it's at. And part of the reason for that is it's the community nature of what they're providing. We all know, we get to know our host and we get to know the broadcasters, and we have these great relationships with them. We see them at community events. So we do trust them because they are more familiar to us. On the other hand, we have seen a loss of local news. Since 2005, there's a great report that comes from Northwestern University's Medill School about the state of local news. And we have seen 40% of our local newspapers close since then, and creating these what we call news deserts, which means that there are places that don't have any local news sources, which is really problematic for people becoming, really great citizens of their community and know what's going on.
And, I think local news is where it's at. I think we may have to take that tagline and start using it here. We're going to have to.
You should just say, like, the most trusted source. So
absolutely. You're helping us out quite a bit here. This is a very advantageous interview, but we do unfortunately have to dig into some of the other findings you've had here. And you guys have a lot of information about artificial intelligence. I'll keep this one, we'll zoom back out with this one. You can take this wherever you want. How is AI interacting with the advent of the misinformation and disinformation age here?
Yeah, I think as AI improves, it's becoming more difficult to discern disinformation. I've also had personal experiences where I take those quizzes, like, is this disinformation or not? And trying to spot deep fakes or, what's real and what's not. And it's really hard. It's going to become increasingly harder for people to see. But what we did find in our study is that people are trusting generative AI more. So, for example, like ChatGPT, that we found 11 percentage point increase, which is pretty significant, on people who are trusting these platforms more than they did last year.
And, so we're in this situation, and you've given us a lot of insight into where we stand and how we got there. And I know that one solution that we've talked about here is that local news is a great resource. But we know, as you said, there are growing news deserts. We also know that for young people, that's typically not a resource they use. It's one that we certainly hope that they would, but it just is not at this point in time. So the question is, what do we do next? How do we try and curb this problem, not just as it stands today, but for future generations of Americans?
Yeah, so we have a lot of great links and resources on our website at instituteforpr.org, including like a communicator's guide to election disinformation, because we're going to see it ramp up with the midterms. You all just had a very big Supreme Court decision today. So that is really helpful to learn about resources. And we all can be responsible for helping stop disinformation. And we have a resource talking about think before you link. And disinformation is designed to make people angry and emotional. So thinking before you share something to make sure that it is actually accurate and it's actually furthering the conversation and helping people be informed. And support local journalism through subscriptions. I mean, that's very important as well. And just sort of fight for local journalism in general.
And you talk about angry and emotional, something you mentioned within that answer. And it seems like the research has determined that angry and emotional content online and on television is what is most prone to grow viewership, maintain viewership, and keep people watching. And so if misinformation and disinformation are sort of in a little bit of a dance with angry and emotional news, is there something about human psychology that makes us just inherently and naturally prone to disinformation? Are we drawn to that in some way, more so than we are to the facts?
Absolutely. One of the things that what we see that people do is they have selection bias. They want to select information that agrees with their viewpoints. So when you have some, and a lot of times it's built to be divisive. So if you have some content that is sort of verifying your perspective and verifying your thoughts, then you're also more likely to share it because it's like, see, I'm actually right. There's what we also found in this study is that we ask a question if people knowingly share disinformation, and we've seen that range from about 12 to 14% of our 2,000 respondents do say they knowingly share disinformation. And there's some great research out of NYU that people share disinformation sometimes because it's sort of, they would rather do that and sort of verify who they are as an individual rather than admit that they're wrong. And there's a term called nationalistic narcissism. And it's fascinating research to see why people actually knowingly share disinformation as well.
What was that term again?
Oh, it's called nationalistic narcissism.
Okay, that's a new term for us here on Live Impact News, and
it's a new term for a lot of people. So yeah. Yes.
Oh, that's great. I mean, this is great. We've learned a lot, not just that, but throughout the course of this interview. We really appreciate you taking the time. Dr. McCorkindale, maybe we'll be able to have you on again, as this certainly isn't a problem that's going away anytime soon, but it's one that we here are as invested as anyone in trying to fix. So thanks so much for shedding a little bit more light on this.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Connor. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. That is Dr. Tina McCorkindale from the Institute of Public Relations. And again, she laid that website out there. You can go and visit that website for resources to help and try and make sure that you are doing everything you can to not be prone to spreading and ingesting disinformation and misinformation. Now, as for us here on Live Impact News, let's go ahead and take another commercial break. When we get back, we have more coverage of today's breaking news, the Virginia Supreme Court ruling on redistricting. That's coming up next. Okay, welcome back to Live Impact News. We are about to bring on Dr. Leslie Coggle from Virginia Wesleyan University. She's the Associate Professor of Political Science, the Chair of the Political Science Department, and we'll be bringing her on in just a moment. The reason we hesitate is because we want to read yet another statement we've gotten from at this point, a politician in Virginia, a politician that is running for congressional office in the midterms, and a politician who was a congresswoman for a term here, Elaine Loria, looking to represent the 2nd District and has represented the 2nd District here in Virginia, releasing a statement on this Supreme Court ruling. Let's go through this very quickly here. As I have said since day one of this campaign, I intend to win Virginia's 2nd Congressional District to end the failed policies of Jen Kiggans, President Trump, and a broken Washington that have made life unaffordable for Virginians and their families. The Virginia Supreme Court's decision today does not change that. Unlike Republican-controlled states, Virginia put the proposed maps to a vote, with nearly 1.6 million Virginians overwhelmingly supporting the referendum to level the playing field, preserve fair representation, and protect our democracy. We will continue our campaign's momentum into November to flip this seat, fight for working families, and get to work for the Virginians who are being left behind by Jen Kiggans and Donald Trump. That, again, is from Elaine Loria, who was challenging Jen Kiggans for that seat in Congress representing the 2nd District. And I will note that while this has taken the maps back to their original drawing before this redistricting began, it does not mean that the numbers will break down the same after the midterm elections. It does not guarantee a continued 6-4 advantage for Democrats. Those seats could still change based on those elections. That's a good thing to note and was alluded to by Elaine Loria in that statement. Okay, let's bring on Leslie Coggle. Leslie is always so generous with her time, and today, just such a quick response. We appreciate you joining us sort of on a whim here, Dr. Coggle. And I'll just start very broad here. Your reaction when you saw this decision from the Virginia Supreme Court?
Yeah, my reaction when I saw this decision is, on some level, I feel like, politics aside, for trust in government, this was a really maybe the worst outcome we could see, because I think part of what this does is plays into a narrative of the courts being politicized, maybe in the sense that for Democrats or people who voted for this redistricting measure, on top of the Supreme Court case, kind of gutting what is left of the Voting Rights Act, and some kind of other cases that are going to lead to the further redrawing of maps, I think you see a situation in which it's just becoming clearer and clearer to voters that the the playing field is not level right now between the parties when it comes to the redrawing of the maps, right? And the I think there's also a fear that you would have that people who voted for these maps are going to feel that the Supreme Court has delegitimized a kind of popular decision, which they have here, and for good reason, right? There were very real concerns that underlie this map, but they let the vote go forward. So now you have all of these people who've participated in the process who feel kind of like their votes are being thrown out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and to your point, something we noted very early in the stream that you just reemphasized there is that this case came before the Virginia Supreme Court prior to the election happening. The Virginia Supreme Court decided to delay their decision until after the election, which led to not only 3 million Virginians going to the polls to vote, a majority of those Virginians choosing a certain outcome, and $83 million being spent on these campaigns that now is completely nullified by this decision. Did you feel like their original decision to delay their deliberations indicated that they would essentially follow the results of that vote? Was that your impression when they first did that?
I guess if you had asked me to bet money on an outcome, yeah, that would have been my guess or the impression that I got. I think, though, what this should draw our attention to is, let's assume that the court let this move forward because they weren't sure what they were going to decide, and they were weighing what are very important and legitimate questions. And they didn't want to take this out of the hands of voters before an election. This is why you don't do this stuff so close to elections, right? And when we started this redrawing of the map with Texas, all of these activities are oriented around affecting these midterm elections. I think there are unintended consequences to all of these things. And I'm sure the court's not eager to be in what the Supreme Court at one point in time with regard to gerrymandering called the political thicket. They'd like to make these decisions and maybe stay out of the limelight. But politicians are kind of putting them in the middle of this because we're doing this so rapidly and so close to elections. And I know when I said I think this is the worst possible outcome, I think you're alluding to part of what I consider so bad about it. If the Supreme Court of Virginia had just said no on this vote, it's too close to the election, then there would have been people upset with the outcome. But I don't think that it's quite as bad as this outcome, which is people feel their vote has been nullified. And you mentioned the amount of money spent on this election. There was an ungodly amount of money spent on this election in time and political capital used by politicians to get this referendum forward. There were real costs incurred here, I think, both in terms of money and public trust. That our resources I really don't think we can squander in this political moment.
And then when we look at, you mentioned the Voting Rights Act severely weakened by a Supreme Court decision that we saw come down here recently. We look at the juxtaposition of that decision, a number of southern states sort of scrambling to redraw their districts, along with what was considered to be a big win for Democrats in Virginia being nullified by the state Supreme Court. Are we now set up for a situation where, I guess I'm trying to think of how to phrase this question. How big of a win is this for Republicans when you look at these two decisions in concert with each other? And is this something that you think is meaningfully going to impact the midterms to a point where the ownership of the House will actually change based on these two decisions?
So I'm going to separate out those questions. I think this year is likely to be a wave election. And I don't know that the combination of those Voting Rights Act decisions and the redrawing of the maps is going to change the outcome of the election, which I think leans pretty strongly toward Democrats retaking the House. I would say, though, that the one thing that I do think about as we're considering this, and maybe this is the optimist way of looking at this, just in the sense of good government and maybe not wanting politicians to be choosing their voters, and that all of these gerrymandered maps are being they're being drawn based on data from 2020 and 2024, especially 2024. And politics now look a little differently than they did in 2024. I think there's a real risk that politicians are going to draw maps that they think buy them more seats, but end up weakening some of their incumbents and putting some people who didn't expect to be vulnerable in the election in tighter elections. So I do think, to the extent that there are a lot of Democrats being like, this is the end, Republicans are keeping the House, I don't think that's generally the case. I do think this is a big win for Republicans, though, because what Virginia's kind of redistricting election outcome meant was that essentially they had evened the map with the early redistricting done in places like Texas. And one of the complicating factors for Democrats here has been that, much like Virginia, some Democratic run states in the past decade or so had done a lot of good government reforms that took the power to gerrymander maps out of the hands of state legislatures or governors and kind of made the process at least maybe more bipartisan or less partisan. A lot of conservative states didn't do that. That means conservative states have a lot more room if they're going to do these mid-cycle redraws to try to carve out new maps. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get what they want in terms of, kind of exactly predicting where the vote's going to go. But it does mean that they have more room to quickly maneuver to the extent that we're at a race to the bottom to redraw the maps to maximize seats. But I just want to reiterate, if you're concerned about elections being outcomes where voters can make their preferences known, this whole process has got to leave you feeling really disgusted. Kind of this idea that the Supreme Court changes the Voting Rights Act, and immediately we have a bunch of states redrawing districts. One state, Louisiana, like essentially is postponing their primary to do this, right? So, and the Supreme Court itself had shortened the window that they usually have on implementing a ruling to make this possible. So this just doesn't make you feel great about the state of elections or democracies in the United States right now.
And what you mentioned there at the end is another interesting juxtaposition. You see in Louisiana essentially delaying the primary vote, whereas this decision comes down to almost a semantic interpretation of when an election began or didn't begin. So it's again, we see these contrasts and they're illuminating for sure. Now you did mention reasons for optimism, which I appreciate, and I'm wondering, as far as more reasons for optimism, you said you talked about how we got to sort of observe the preferences and the will of the people. Now, the impact of that has been nullified by this decision, but the data remains. Are there things that both the Republican and Democratic parties can take away from this experience that will ultimately be beneficial?
What can the Republican Democratic parties take away? I think one of the things that we can take away here is that the courts are going to be really important in laying the boundaries for these processes. If I were to say one thing about the Virginia Supreme Court decision, I've given you a lot of reasons that I feel like it undermines public trust. And, there are problems then that are broader implications of that decision after letting a vote go forward. But it's also like a legitimate question to ask when an election begins, when we have early voting. This was an important question. And there's a very strong argument to be made that, if the the House is taking a vote on something after people have already started casting their ballots, the election has begun. So I do think, courts are still pretty central in this, and politicians and political parties aren't just going to get to move forward. It just kind of willy-nilly based on what they want to do. Um, the other thing I would say too, if there's something positive for Democrats, I think you kind of see it in Elaine Loria's statement. I think it should be that reminder that you can redraw the maps, but there's only so much you can do with those boundaries if you have wave elections. And there's always the risk, for example, in places in the South like Tennessee that are redrawing their maps to endanger what are majority minority districts, that what you're going to do is upset minority populations and increase their voting turnout and ultimately kind of create what you call a dummy mander. In political science, we talk about gerrymanders that people kind of write that end up backfiring against them and costing them seats. Because of their arrogance, dummy manders. And I think you could see the possibility of this happening, right? This doesn't change how voters feel about the political moment. In fact, you know, I'm an American political scientist, so I always am careful when I venture into kind of territory outside of that. But when you hear a lot of people who study elections and who study European politics and democratic backsliding talk about the recent vote in Hungary, in which they took a like seemingly authoritarian leader and kind of pushed him out of power through electoral mechanisms, that part of what motivated voters weren't a lot of the things that bothered, you know, people in elite circles, like his kind of push against anti-trans, anti-gay populations, and the Democratic backsliding itself. It's the appearance of corruption. Voters don't like corruption, and they don't like the sense that they're not doing well, while politicians are like taking stuff for themselves. And there's a narrative here that these redistricting activities are precisely that. Like politicians maybe should be concerned about things like the war in Iran and gas prices. Meanwhile, we're trying to kind of carve out another another Senate seat. I'm sorry, House seat in Tennessee, in a Democratic district, right? You're trying to take away one seat. So I think it doesn't necessarily look good for the party in power, the party redrawing these maps, and it really feeds into a public corruption narrative that we know is motivating toward voters.
And we always learn something when we bring Leslie Coggle on the stream. Today, that something is dummy mander. I had not heard that term before. Interesting, and I would bet something we hear more often as this kind of process continues to play out. You know, you joined us last minute here. We really appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to add before we let you go?
No, oh, actually, yeah, I think there are a couple of races in Virginia. This is obviously going to really affect. In the Kagan's-Loria race is going to be a competitive one. It was going to be a competitive one regardless, just because of the current political environment. But this change in the map, I think, really puts that race back on our radar as one of these really competitive races where a Democrat might win, but the Republican has a much better opportunity of holding the seat. So this is exactly kind of the type of race that these new maps are aimed at, kind of stacking kind of 4 against 1 party. So this is just a really interesting one to watch. And if you're Jen Kagans today, I have to imagine you and your campaign are feeling much better about the race, knowing that you are not running in a district that now, you know, it comprises some of Bobby Scott's pretty traditional Democratic voters.
Okay, very good. And that's a race that we certainly will have a great amount of attention on. I'm sure we'll talk to you about it plenty as we approach November. But for the time being, we really appreciate your time today. This has been so helpful for us. And hopefully you have a great rest of your Friday and off into the weekend.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay, so Leslie Coggle there from Virginia Wesleyan University. Always helpful when discussing political issues, and today came on the stream last minute for us after we got this breaking news. So really, really appreciate her. Also really appreciate super producer Sarah Calloway, who you see on your screen. And we both appreciate meteorologist Hunter Force giving a very charismatic wave right now. And he is here because coming up next, after this break, we will be having a forecast, a forced cast, letting you know how that rain may have helped drought conditions and what to look forward to this weekend. Hunter, anything you want to tease to?
Mother's Day weekend, not looking too bad. Stay tuned. And much warmer.
We have a professional in the studio, ladies and gentlemen. We will be right back. welcome back to Live Impact News here on 13 News Now. 2:07 p.m. We embark upon our second hour with a special guest that everyone has been waiting to see. The comments have been flowing in. Where is Hunter? When is Hunter coming on? I'm going to mute it. Text me when Hunter is on. And now he's here, and he's waited until this moment to fix his hair, despite sitting for many, many minutes. Now, Hunter, do you want to start with yesterday's rain, or do you want to start with the Mother's Day weekend forecast?
We could talk about the rainfall we saw yesterday.
Let's do it.
Wasn't a drought buster, but it was certainly helpful, and it was a good amount of rain. We picked up well over an inch in a lot of spots, especially around the south side and parts of eastern North Carolina. Norfolk picked up just under an inch and a half of rain, which is fantastic. Around 9/10 of an inch in Virginia Beach, an inch and a quarter in Suffolk, and well over an inch in Roanoke Rapids, 1.8 inches for you guys, 1.7 inches in Ahoskie, around 4/10 of an inch in Elizabeth City, and a little bit less further off towards the north. So around 1/10 of an inch in West Point and Wallops Island, 1/100th of an inch in Saluda. So didn't see a whole lot along the eastern shore. Picked up a little bit more in areas around Cape Charles, but overall a pretty healthy amount of rain. And it wasn't overwhelming. We didn't see extreme heavy downpours. It was light to moderate rain with, a few downpours here and there, but nothing that was too overwhelming. We didn't see any flash flood warnings or flood advisories. So it was just a best case scenario for us. Even though it was a cool, dreary day, it was fine. This weekend, though, Mother's Day weekend.
That was beautiful.
Oh, Sarah, you called me out like that.
Can we do so? Can we bring Hunter up full here? Because on the screen behind him, a very quaint sort of like single-use person boat is just floating through the river in Norfolk. No, look down towards the bottom of the screen. Look at that to your right, behind the sails on this sailboat. Look at that.
Right
We've got a little recreational boat. Someone's just out on a Friday enjoying the sunshine, having a good time. It's sort of distorted a little bit by the boat itself. I thought it was going to be more visible and just sort of keep going towards the other side of the water. You can't see it as well. But I just thought that was
talking
cool.
about it, so it wants to hide.
I was really excited when I saw it. Someone's just having themselves a Friday, and that is what we support here on Live Impact News.
And that's what we support.
Thank you for emphasizing that. Okay, back to the forecast. I'm sorry for the tangent.
It's okay. Beautiful Mother's Day weekend, 80 degrees on Saturday. A chance for an isolated shower or two heading into the afternoon and evening. I think most of us should stay dry, but you may run into a shower. But overall, a nice day. If you were going to head to the beach, but you just want to keep that in mind. Sunday, a little bit warmer, lower 80s. Another chance for an isolated shower or two, but overall, not a bad Mother's Day. Any brunch plans, you're looking good. But if you're doing a weekend getaway, perhaps D.C., Richmond, Charlottesville, the Outer Banks, mid to low 70s on Saturday, mid to low 80s on Sunday. So Richmond's looking good this weekend. Maybe a few showers in D.C. on Saturday. Cooler, but pretty nice for the Outer Banks this weekend, mid to low 70s. So pretty good for Mother's Day. Take a look at this live shot on our Thompson Creek Window Company Skyview. It's giving summer. You got the flag, you got the blue skies, you got the water, you got the greenery.
Another
on the
boat?
trees. You got a boat.
Where people are boating out here.
You look at this and you're like, it's July.
Oh, yeah. Especially the American flag flying right there. This could be an Independence Day live look right here.
But it's not feeling like it at all. It's chilly.
Ooh, what a turn. What a narrative turn you pulled off.
Mid to upper 60s right now.
Oh, man.
64 in Norfolk, 63 in Virginia Beach. It's really not that chilly out. I did walk outside for a minute. It felt comfortable, but not 85. 67 in Hampton, 66 in Newport News, 67 in Suffolk, 67 in Elizabeth City, 66 in Chesapeake, but warmer than yesterday by about 11 to 14 degrees. So it is feeling more comfortable outside. Area of high pressure over us right now, so clear skies for the rest of the day. We'll stay clear heading into this evening. It'll be a nice Friday night. Your commute home, not bad. We'll drop into the upper 50s to low 60s this evening. Mostly clear skies heading into Saturday morning. It'll be a warm start to the day, 8, 9 o'clock. We're in the mid to upper 60s, dry at around 70. Again, a chance for an isolated shower or two heading into the afternoon. But any Saturday night plans, not bad. Still comfortable, low 70s. And then we get into Mother's Day morning. If you're heading out to brunch, 8, 9, 10 o'clock, not bad. Upper 60s to low 70s. This is saying we could get into the mid 80s by the afternoon. So we'll see. But again, a chance for an isolated shower in the afternoon and evening. But overall, not a bad Mother's Day. And then we head into Monday morning, and it's dry, but we will see some showers moving in by the late morning and afternoon on Monday. So some scattered showers. Our next best shot of seeing some beneficial rainfall looking to be on Monday. But overnight tonight, 57 in Norfolk, 55 in Virginia Beach, 49 in Boykins, 56 in Cape Charles, 56 in Hampton. Down into eastern North Carolina, 50 in Ahoskie, 55 in Hertford, 56 in Elizabeth City, 58 degrees in Manio. And another look at tomorrow, not bad, mid to upper 70s to low 80s for your Saturday. Isolated shower chance, mix of sun and clouds. A great start to the weekend. And 7-day forecast. Cooler next week, 70 on Tuesday, but some showers possible on Monday. But overall, not a bad 7-day forecast.
I think this looks great.
Yeah.
This is fantastic. I mean, Sunday and Saturday are beautiful. Like you, I was outside today, and I thought it was awesome.
I thought you were going to stop right there. Saturday and Sunday looking beautiful like you, period.
Oh,
classic.
No, I did. I started a new sentence.
You did start a new sentence.
Yes. The sentiment remains.
And Sarah was on board with me. She thought that as well.
Sarah, confirm or deny on board? Yeah. Okay, that's my bad then. I got to work on my cadence. Now, what else do we need to know? Is there anything else? Did you do a coffee walk this morning?
No. So, yesterday, slept 0 hours.
You were telling us about that.
So last night I fell asleep, and this morning struggle bus getting up.
Did you get a good night's sleep last night?
I got a good amount of hours.
Did you get an 8? 8 solid?
I think more than 8.
Okay, so how come you didn't sleep the night before that?
I don't know.
Okay.
It was just one of those nights.
I think that's probably one of the most relatable things I've ever heard. We've all been there.
We've all been there.
Those restless
and I'm there
nights.
too often.
And it is currently the NBA playoffs, and some of these games are tipping off at 9:30, 10:30 p.m., and you got to watch. And so it just, all of a sudden it's 1 o'clock. You got an early wake up, but we admire the fact that you're here ready to go. Mm-hmm. And if someone had asked me yesterday how your energy levels were, I would have said they were excellent.
I honestly didn't feel that bad.
Yeah, you seem totally normal.
So
kudos to you. Have a wonderful weekend, Hunter. We all look forward to your Saturday forecast. You and Madison Schlegel do an amazing job on that weekend broadcast.
Thank you. We both won't be there this evening, Saturday or Sunday evening, but
ooh,
I'm actually working mornings this weekend.
Okay, I thought you might have had a vacation or something like that. I was gonna get excited for you. Sarah has had her finger on the brake button for a solid 5 minutes straight. We do not want that shoulder to get sore. So let's go ahead and throw it to a commercial break with a huge thanks to Hunter for coming in and giving us a forecast. You can see him on 13 News Now at 4 o'clock p.m. in just about an hour and 45 minutes here. Now, we are going to go once again to commercial. When we get back, President Trump speaking at a podium in Washington, D.C. a little bit earlier today while we were doing our redistricting coverage. We will hear from President Trump when we get back. Welcome back to Live Impact. We're going to get to President Donald Trump from earlier today in just a second. Two more statements that we want to go over in reaction to the Virginia Supreme Court's ruling on redistricting today. The Virginia Supreme Court ruling that the procedure of getting that redistricting referendum on the special election ballot was illegitimate and unconstitutional, and so therefore the results of that election will not go forward, and Virginia reverts back to the voting districts that were drawn before this entire initiative took place. So how about reaction first from Congressman Rob Whitman? Quote, today's decision by the Supreme Court of Virginia. Oh, I'm sorry. You had McClellan up, didn't you? That's no problem, Sarah. Let's go with Representative Jennifer McClellan first here. This is, again, Representative Jennifer McClellan with this statement. Today's ruling is a disappointment to the 1.6 million Virginians who cast their ballot to level the playing field in response to Donald Trump's attempt to win the House through rigged maps nationwide. This decision comes as GOP-led southern states rush to dilute black votes and erase black representation in Congress following the gutting of the Voting Rights Act by the Supreme Court in Calais versus Louisiana. We are at a critical moment for our democracy. Donald Trump knows Republicans cannot win the midterm elections on the merits of their policies, so he seeks to rig the election through partisan gerrymandering. We cannot allow him to silence our voices. We are witnessing the largest backlash to black political, economic, and social power since the post-Reconstruction era, when Jim Crow tactics led to nearly a century between the first black representative in Congress and state legislatures and the second generation in the 1960s. We cannot let that history repeat itself. Just like our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents did before us, we must organize, mobilize, and vote to protect our progress. Americans are furious at Donald Trump's attempts to stack the deck, and we will come to the polls in record numbers this November to protect our voices and our votes. Again, that is Jennifer McClellan. And again, a sentiment that you've seen echoed in a number of these statements is the decision by the Supreme Court that has gutted the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and has led to another round of redistricting, primarily in southern states. Now, let's go to where we were just a moment before that, which is a statement from Congressman Rob Whitman on that Supreme Court ruling, a representative from right here in Hampton Roads. Quote, today's decision by the Supreme Court of Virginia affirms what we have said from the very beginning. This redistricting process was unconstitutional. The court has made clear that you cannot cut corners on the Constitution, ignore required procedures, and mislead voters to force through changes of this magnitude. The amendment was invalid from the start, and the attempt to rush it through outside the constitutional framework has been rightly rejected. These constitutional requirements are not technicalities. They are deliberate safeguards designed to ensure transparency, accountability, and that voters fully understand what they are being asked to decide. This is not about politics. It is about protecting the rule of law and the integrity of our Constitution. Virginians deserve a process that is transparent, lawful, and worthy of their trust. I remain committed to continuing to work on behalf of Virginia's 1st Congressional District and ensuring our communities have a strong local voice. That, again, is Rob Whitman there with his statement on redistricting. Now, we also have a statement from Senator Tim Kaine that we have not read yet. Sarah, what do you think? Should I go through that, or should we save that for a little later in the stream? Okay, let's go with Senator Tim Kaine and his statement on this Virginia Supreme Court decision. Quote, unlike Republican-led states that have redrawn their maps through backroom deals, the Virginia General Assembly let the people decide for themselves in a free and fair election. If the Virginia Supreme Court had legitimate concerns about this referendum, the time to stop it would have been before 3 million Virginians cast their ballots. But the court let the process move forward, and Virginians sent a message loud and clear. We see President Trump's brazen power grab in states across the country, and we won't stand for it. The timing of this ruling speaks volumes. The U.S. Supreme Court eviscerates the Voting Rights Act in a lawsuit brought by a January 6th extremist, and southern states race to craft backroom deals disenfranchising minority voters and candidates. Meanwhile, Virginia voters choose to stand up against national disenfranchisement, only to see their votes cast into the trash by a 4-3 ruling. A sad day indeed, but I'm proud of Virginians' willingness to stay true to our state's motto after 250 years. That spirit is needed now more than ever. Okay, so those are statements from multiple representatives here as everyone is reacting to what we've seen from the Virginia Supreme Court. Now, we told you we would get to Trump, but we had those statements flowing in, so we wanted to make sure that we got through those here as we continue with our redistricting coverage. Let's go ahead and take another commercial break. When we get back this time, we're going straight to President Trump from earlier today at the White House. Okay, back here in the Live Impact News studio on this Friday afternoon, and we are moving right along here. We are now going to go, as promised, out to the White House, where President Donald Trump was addressing the media earlier today. Now, through all of our redistricting coverage, we did not get a chance to listen in on any of this live, and we've been in the studio sort of since it happened. I can give you an update on what is likely being spoken about here. Well, no, all we know is these are remarks in the Rose Garden. So let's take a listen and we'll find out. Okay, we've got a frozen video there, as you can see. It usually takes us just a couple seconds to get those reloaded and ready to go. So this should be no time at all until everything is back and up and running and we are ready for that coverage. In the meantime, I will go through an Associated Press story here that is likely of general interest. UFO files have been released, shedding light on sightings, but leaving interpretation open to the public. This includes a new batch of files on UFOs that the Pentagon began releasing today as President Donald Trump taps into, quote, the unidentified anomalous phenomena in the broader universe. Now, the Pentagon has been working on declassifying the documents for years. Trump put attention back on the topic months ago, teasing a major UFO document dump. So President Trump releasing a new batch of files on UFOs, something that has been of general curiosity for, you know, anyone anywhere, much less the American public, for years and years, as long as human beings have gazed at the cosmos. However, again, allowing the public to draw its own conclusions. This includes old State Department cables, FBI documents, transcripts from NASA of crewed flights into space, and it's a new Pentagon website housing the documents that is available for anyone to go and look at if they would like. Included in these documents, Buzz Aldrin, one of those astronauts on the original mission up to the moon, observing a, quote, fairly bright light source while aboard the Apollo 11, a mysterious object making multiple 90-degree turns at a speedy clip, and a blaringly bright object doing corkscrew twists over the skies in Kazakhstan. So that from Buzz Aldrin is a part of those files, again, released today. So we wanted to touch on that. And here is President Trump, as promised, in the Rose Garden.
We love that song. We could have listened to the whole song. We had that right from the beginning. It's Lee Greenwood, and it's been a great tribute to all of us. Why don't we sit down? We've got plenty of time, right? Special people, very special people. And I hope you like what we're doing. Did everybody get to see the Presidential Walk of Fame? Right? And you have some of your favorite presidents there, some of your least favorite presidents. Some were good, some were great, some were terrible, but that's the way life goes, right? And you notice the roses. This is a rose garden, and we added a lot of roses, I will tell you. This was a rose garden that didn't have too many roses, and if you look now, we cornered the market on roses, and you deserve them. So thank you for being with us in this beautiful spring, this gorgeous spring day. The very famous Rose Garden has been famous for a long time. They let it get a little bit out of control, but now it's brought back to the highest level. And, you know, where you're standing or sitting right now is white stone, and that was grass. And the problem with it is you couldn't walk on it because this is built on a wetland, and the grass was always soaking wet. It didn't matter. It was always soaking wet, absolutely. And so when Brooke Rollins would get up and start making a magnificent speech, and she'd be standing in mud, and she'd say, I ruined my shoes. Her speeches would never be as good as they could have been because she was always concerned about ruining her shoes. But people would come here, women would come with the high heels, and it wasn't a pretty picture. So after about 150 years, we gave up in the grass, so we said, let's build it so we can use it. And now we have lunches here, we have dinners here, and it's nice and it's cool. The white reflects the sun, so you don't, although it does go in my eye right now, I noticed. I didn't anticipate that, but it's a great place. It's a great place, and we do news conferences, we do everything. And right up here, you probably noticed the new black granite, and it's been so well received, people can't even believe it, because the stones were all broken and really in bad disrepair. And it's really become great. And we added the pictures of the presidents, from George Washington to a guy named Trump. And people really, they've loved it. We call it the Presidential Wall of Fame or Walk of Fame. We say you could call it either. Do you like walk or wall? Ready? Walk, Presidential Walk of Fame. Presidential Wall of Fame. Same. That's the same. I would call that a tie. But I want to thank you all for being here. It's amazing. The weekend we celebrate Mother's Day, honoring the women who raised us and all of the wonderful mothers in our lives for millions of American families. Sunday will be filled with love and gratitude and joy. I had a great mother, by the way. And today we're honored to be joined by many strong and truly heroic moms who have stood up for their children, both in life and in a very profound loss. Very, very terrible just terrible loss, many cases. And we have a lot of the greatest people on earth. Angel moms, they're with us today. They're great people. They've been through so much. And I got to know so many of you during my first days of running. I got to know you and I got to love you. But we want to thank you for being here. Mother's Day, it's one of the great days. I always think so fondly of my mother. I had a wonderful mother. Among those with us this afternoon are a number of the angel moms who saw their precious children stolen from them by the open border policies of the radical left. Open borders, I call them stupid borders, not open. I call them stupid borders, by stupid people that put them there. And the migrant criminals that let them pour into our country, and bad things happened. Bad things happened. 25 million people came into our country. Many of them were criminals. Many of them were murderers. They allowed them in with their open border policy of stupidity. These incredibly brave and resilient women have turned terrible tragedy into unyielding resolve, becoming advocates so that their mothers do not have to endure the same heartache that they've felt all their lives. They've felt for so long. They've raised the most beautiful child that has taken, and they've spent so many years. In many cases, I see some of you I've known you for years, and others are unfortunately new members of that club. And I say unfortunately, it's a sad thing. Should have never happened. Should have never happened. In their honor, we've rapidly turned the worst and most dangerous border in the history of our country into the strongest border in American history. We have no people come in during the last 11 months. We have zero. Nobody even tries to come up. You know, you used to read about the thousands of people that would pour in, and they'd just come up in caravans. I think it was my name I came up with. It looked like a caravan. 25, 30,000 people pouring up. They walk through Mexico. They come from all different locations, come from all over the world, actually. But they came in through our southern border, and they'd come up and just let them walk in. They'd walk in. Nobody had any idea who they were. They were murderers. 11,888 murderers. They were allowed to come into our country. We've gotten a lot of them out. Many of them murdered more than one person. What a shame. What a disgusting shame. That people can even think that this is okay is pretty incredible. But for the past 12 months, that's been our number. And these numbers are done by people that the numbers, when I say zero, I actually mean zero. It's hard to believe, actually. But they're done by people they tend to be somewhat on the left. So they're not going to give us a fair shake. And they say that, people don't come anymore because they know they're not going to get through. So when they know they're not going to get through, they just don't come. And just on that, we save a lot of lives, because that journey up from Honduras and El Salvador and lots of other countries, or from the Congo, where they drop them there and they walk up and they come through our country. They emptied the prisons of the Congo into the area of the southern border and then told them to just walk in, because stupid Americans are going to accept you beautifully. And these were hard, mean, vicious criminals they allowed into our country. How anybody can vote for these people is hard to believe, okay? It's hard to believe. But to a friend of mine, Marianne Mendoza. Marianne, where is Marianne? Where are you, Marianne? I got to know you right from the beginning, right? And I won't ask her that, but I would often ask, is it easier with time? Because time has gone by. Marianne, no, it's not. Sadly, it's not. You know, you always hear with time, but a lot of people say it's not easier. But you're a special woman. I've gotten to be a friend of yours. You're a special woman. What you have to go through is disgraceful. Tammy Nobles. Tammy, are you here? Tammy Nobles. Right. Does time help, Tammy? No.
No,
It used to be, you know, time heals all wounds, right? But it doesn't.
that's a joke.
Doesn't. When you love somebody that much, it doesn't help like it should. Jacqueline Medina, a great person. Where is Jacqueline? Jacqueline, where are you? Thank you, darling. Thank you. And so many others, and I want to thank you for coming. And I don't think you've been treated properly. It's hard to believe, but the angel moms have not been treated properly. But this president treats you properly. I can't speak for others, but this one treats you properly. And we love you all, and all I can say is our hearts are out to you on Mother's Day, and you have a good Mother's Day. Go and have a good Mother's Day. In securing our border, we've also made tremendous strides in stopping the flow of illegal drugs into our country. The flood of deadly fentanyl across our border is down by 59%, and the drugs coming in by sea are down by 97%. 97%. And we're trying to figure out who the 3% are, because they are the bravest people on earth. You see how we stop them by sea. You know, for years they'd go and catch the boat, bring them to court, they'd go in, they'd go out. By the time of the evening, they'd be back on another boat, bringing drugs in. So we gave them warning, and we don't do that anymore. We do it much more efficiently. But think of that, down by sea. A lot of them came in, about 50%. It's down 97. Now we've started a very strong. The sea was more difficult, and now we've started land, and you'll see it coming down. It's come down a lot, but you'll see it coming down. And they come through Mexico for the most part. We have a problem because the cartels rule Mexico, and nobody else. The cartels, they just rule it, and you know, we lose 200,000 people a year through this poison that pours into our country. So we have the sea done, meaning the ocean, waterways, pretty much done, 97%, and we're going to have the land done very soon. I want to thank the brave moms fighting the epidemic of drug addiction here, and this afternoon, including Ann Funder. Ann, you here someplace? Ann Funder does a great job. Wow, good. That's a great job you do, Ann. Stephanie Rowe. Stephanie, thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you. Behind the cameras there, Stephanie. Thank you very much. And a friend of mine, Jackie Siegel, who's a great mom, great mother. Thank you, Jackie. I've known her for a long time. She looks better now than she did 20 years ago, right? Thank you very much, Jackie. Last summer, it was my great honor to sign the Halt Fentanyl Act into law, and we'll never give up on that mission for ending the drug epidemic in America. We've come a long way, though. We've stopped massive amounts of drugs from coming in. This afternoon, we're also joined by some of the most extraordinary mothers our nation has ever produced, our cherished Gold Star moms. These are Gold Star moms. These mothers raised up children so selfless and so devoted that they volunteered to wear the uniform of our nation and laid down their lives for all of us. One of those mothers is Janice Chance. Janice, where is Janice? Thank you. Thank you, Janice. Hi, you look great. That's a beautiful hat. Thank you, Janice. Who lost her son, Marine Captain Jesse Melton, and I heard he was an outstanding. They give me lists and they tell me about people. You know, they said that Jesse was outstanding, Janice. They have the word outstanding. Thank you for being here. Just before he went to Afghanistan in 2008, Jesse told his mother, "Mom, I want to go change the world and make it an even better place. I want to make it a better place, Mom." Just before his 30th birthday, even though he had the day off, Jesse volunteered to take the place of a fellow Marine and that of his brother-in-arms could be present for the birth of a daughter. That day, Jesse gave his life for our country. Jesse was struck down that day by helping somebody else. And Janice, I want to say America is a strong and free nation today because of people like your great son, and we want to thank you for being here. Thank you very much. I also want to express my love for the moms with us whose extraordinary heroes gave their lives in the terrorist attack at Abbey Gate in Afghanistan. I got to know you very well.
All right, President Trump, a celebration of Mother's Day, it seems, outside the White House today as he shouts out different moms, speaking quite a bit about immigration at the beginning of that, but ultimately working his way towards what appears to be some sort of ceremonial celebration about Mother's Day weekend arriving here in the United States. So we're going to take a brief commercial break here. When we get back, we're actually going to hear from President Trump's opponent in the most recent presidential election. Kamala Harris was on stage not long ago speaking about upcoming elections. We'll be right back. right, welcome back to Live Impact News. We've got about 14 minutes left, not just in today's stream, but in the entire week of streaming. We did a morning stream and an afternoon stream today, and we have 14 minutes left. Delirium is working its way in, but we've got 14 more strong minutes for you guys. And we're going to hear from Kamala Harris now. We just heard from President Donald Trump. Now we'll hear from former Vice President of the United States and former presidential candidate Kamala Harris, who's speaking about future elections. Let's have a listen.
And speaking of the midterms, because you've referenced, our NATO allies having, memories of the abuse of power. And I'm hoping after these midterms, abuse of power becomes a distant memory when we win back the House and the Senate, right?
But it's not going to be easy, guys. It's not going to be easy. They are throwing all kinds of obstacles in our way. That decision from the Supreme Court on the Voting Rights Act.
It's my next question for you.
Yo, great.
Yeah. So last week, the Supreme Court threw a devastating blow, right, hammering the Voting Rights Act. How do you think that's going to play into the midterm elections?
I think it's going to have a profound effect. You already have seen. Look, first of all, so I was interviewed recently, and they said, the first question was, because it was the day of it happening, and they said, well, when you first heard about it, what did you think? And because I was in California, we're on Pacific Standard Time, it was really early in the morning. And again, pardon my language, but so the first thing I heard about it was at the crack of dawn, and I was like, shit, I thought this was going to happen in June. I didn't think it was going to, because normally a lot of the big cases come down in June. Okay, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I just pay attention. So, to answer the question, the midterms, why did they come down with this decision so early? To give all those states, you see what's happened, Mississippi, Tennessee most recently, Louisiana, so they could pull together what they need to do around redrawing their lines. You saw just what happened in Tennessee. To redraw those lines, to get those ballots printed for the midterms. Understand what's happening. I was in North Carolina. And let me tell you, I went to go visit a group of students because I'd been reading about how they're organizing around voting. These students attend North Carolina A&T. It is the largest HBCU in America. These young leaders have been organizing because the officials there took their polling place from the campus. So whereas we raise our children, especially when they hit that age, college age, whether they're in college or not, where we want them to set up good habits, we know that that's the stage at which you will develop your patterns for what you'll do in your life. So we want, don't we? We want that our young people will have as part of their pattern that they vote every election, whoever they vote for. They took their polling place. And then when I met with them, they shared with me, so they organized and went up to the Capitol to go speak. And do you know what they were told in the chamber? You only have 5 minutes. I'm not finished. You only have 5 minutes to leave. The arrogance of the brutality of this attack on voting rights. And so we should, by all accounts, based on merit, win the midterms. But it is not going to be easy. People say to me, well, you think they're going to cancel the elections? No, I don't. Because if you thought no Kings rallies were a big deal, people will definitely take to the streets. I don't think they're going to do that. What they're doing systematically is making it more difficult for people to vote. Look at the SAVE Act. So the SAVE Act that they keep pushing. So what that would do is for new registrants to vote, to prove your identity, you'd have to have a birth certificate or a passport. Well, passports cost at least $100 to get. So can you say poll tax? Right? If you are one of over 60 million women in America who changed your name when you were married, the name then on your birth certificate.
This cleaner is insane.
Okay, as you can hear, Kamala Harris talking about a lot of the things that we've been discussing today. That Virginia Supreme Court decision came down, nullifying the results of the redistricting referendum we had here in a special election, getting rid of that newly drawn map. That is what we've been talking about for most of our stream, at least the first hour and change, all about redistricting. Kamala Harris speaking about redistricting herself. It has become a hot button topic here ahead of the midterms. Now, that also includes the Supreme Court making that decision that has hampered the Voting Rights Act, all of it working in conjunction with each other as November approaches. Now, Sarah, what do you think here? We go to break, we come back, we finish up the show? All right, we're going to do another commercial break here. We're going to be right back in a couple minutes. 8 minutes left in Live Impact News this week. Stay with us for the rest of it. All right, welcome back to Live Impact News here. As we have about 5 minutes and change left on our stream, we are actually going to head to the sports world now. Our final segment will be in regards to an Old Dominion University legend, quite possibly the most esteemed player in the history of the ODU football program, up there in terms of most iconic athletes in the history of the university at large. Taylor Heinicke announcing his retirement today from the NFL. Now, Taylor Heinicke's college career at Old Dominion was record-setting and trend-setting and helped elevate that program to heights that were near unprecedented in how quickly it went from being a brand new program to a Division I program. Taylor Heinicke, the catalyst, along with his head coach, Bobby Wilder, to creating a truly special program at ODU in a very, very fast amount of time. Heinicke would then move on to the NFL. Let's first go over some of these college stats, okay? Let's start now. Granted, the school is moving up levels as we go here. By Heinicke's final year, I do believe they had advanced to the Division I level, but they started out at a lower level here before moving up, simply put, because they were so good. Taylor Heinicke began his college career at the FCS level with Old Dominion before the school made the switch to FBS in 2013. So 2013, they moved to FBS, and in the 2014 season at the FBS level, 3,476 yards and 30 touchdowns passing, 2 touchdowns running. His most statistically prominent season, regardless of competition, 2012, 5,076 yards passing, 44 touchdowns passing, 11 touchdowns rushing. So he accounted for over 50 touchdowns and 5,000 yards passing against FCS competition before moving up to FBS and continuing to be an excellent player. Heineke then moved on to the NFL. Now, Heineke in the NFL had trouble catching on at first. Early in his career, he was a bit of a journeyman. He found trouble with getting consistently onto the field for a number of teams. In total, he did play with 7 franchises, appearing in games with 4 of them. But his journey to relevance as an NFL quarterback is nothing short of remarkable. Let's go all the way back to the COVID-19 pandemic. During the COVID-19 pandemic, it was difficult to field a full team because if any player came in contact with COVID, if you remember, they had to isolate, they had to quarantine, their ability to play came into question, much less when they got sick. So Taylor Heineke was sleeping on his sister's couch in Atlanta, taking online classes to complete his degree at Old Dominion, not on an NFL roster, looking to finish the rest of his life in a different field when he got a call from Washington. Washington called him to be their emergency 4th quarterback. He was kept separate from the other quarterbacks in case they caught COVID-19 and couldn't play. Well, he ended up playing in a first-round playoff game and threw for over 300 yards against the Bucs. The rest is history. A quarterback in the NFL for the rest of his career, both as starter and as a backup. A legend in Norfolk and in Washington, D.C. Taylor Heineke retiring today. Congrats on a great career to a Monarch legend. That does it for us here on Live Impact News for the week. I'm Connor Real. This is Sarah Calloway. Happy Mother's Day, everybody. We hope to see you next week.